All right, time to wrap up UFC 238 here in Chicago. Ariel Helwani, Brett Okamoto. There's a lot to discuss. I think we need to start with the people's main event. Let's work our way up.
Let's do it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's start with Donald Cerrone versus Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson wins via doctor stoppage. Donald Cerrone unable to answer the bell going into the third round. Unfortunately for him, he seemed to break his nose, then blew his nose, and then all of a sudden, boom, eye swells up. It appears as though he may have a broken orbital. First thing I want to ask you is, the expectations were sky high for this fight, right?
Yes.
The moment it was announced, everyone was buzzing.
Yep.
Despite the fact that it ended somewhat unceremoniously, do you feel like the fight lived up to the hype?
I do. I don't know if a lot of other people would agree with me. I think people tend to get hung up on a little bit of controversy, you know, and hopefully I'll be wrong. You know, hopefully the final shot at the end of the second round, which was, I thought, you know, blatantly late. Not that I thought that Tony was trying to do it. In fact, you know, Tony felt just absolutely terrible about it. You could tell backstage afterwards. But I do think that's the type of thing. It's the type of controversial thing. It's the type of discussion topic that can really pull away what I think the focus should be on, and that's how good Tony Ferguson looked and how good the fight was. So that's a kind of a long-winded answer of telling you that, yeah, I thought the fight lived up to the hype. I was perfectly happy with it. I can definitely move on. I mean, some people are talking about a rematch. I don't need to see that at all. It lived up to the hype for me, but I believe that I'll probably be in the minority. I think a lot of people will be talking about that second punch after the bell.
Did you score the first round for Donald? Second round for Tony?
Off the top of my head, I think I had them both for Tony.
Oh, really? Okay, because I thought Tony started slow, definitely figured things out in the second, and I thought the fight was, I mean, momentum was completely in his favor at that point.
Yeah.
I think it was elementary that he was going to eventually win the fight. Donald seemed a little tired, banged up, of course. His face was messed up. I have no problem with the way the fight ended. And by the way, second time in a row for Tony Ferguson that his opponent is unable to answer the bell. Remember Anthony Pettis, different situation, but same result. That's a huge feather in his cap. The guy is super tough. Let's give him credit.
How many times have we seen, you know, kind of a late punch after the bell? And when you have guys of the highest caliber, you expect, hey, don't do that. You know, you guys are veterans. You're supposed to be.
But that's also on the ref. Ref has to step in.
Also on the ref.
Quick.
Yep, we could have a debate about that. I mean, you want to have faith in Tony Ferguson that, hey, you've been in these big spots before. This is not your first big fight. You can't, you know, take a big shot on Cowboy at the end of the second round. So I can understand people, you know, being upset about it, being frustrated by it. But to your point, as far as the fight ending, I don't think it had any impact on it whatsoever. I don't think it had. If Tony Ferguson doesn't throw that punch, I think the exact same thing happens. I, in my mind, feel pretty confident about that.
And I do believe Donald Cerrone himself said that he didn't think the punch led to the serious injury. So I know the fans were upset. I hate when the fans boo, especially after a fight like that. I mean, you're allowed to boo. You're allowed to do whatever you want. I mean, within reason, because you paid to be here. But those two guys gave you everything in those 10 minutes. I mean, those 10 minutes had more action than some of the cards, the fights on this card that went the full 15 minutes. So please, enough with the booing. And thankfully, at the end, they turned around and they cheered Tony because he gave him a nice little speech. But that stuff really grinds my gears. It really bothers me when they do things like that.
Yeah, but I thought Tony handled it completely well.
Oh, he did. But you could tell it bothered him. You could tell. He didn't really know what to say. How do you react to that?
I think it absolutely bothered him, but I do think the biggest thing that bothered Tony was that he threw the punch to begin with. I think he was really upset with himself. And I briefly saw his team, you know, in the back afterwards. I think he was spending a little bit of time on his own, and right when he went back, he was still really upset about it. But I think by the end of the night, especially after Cowboy had once again reiterated, hey man, you know, I blew my nose. I did a rookie mistake there. That's why my eyes blew up. That's why my face blew up. It wasn't you know. I mean, Cowboy was great about it, and I think that by the end of the night, Tony was feeling better about it.
All right, so if the UFC goes up to Tony Ferguson on Monday morning, it says, all right, Tony, you did it. 12 in a row. You haven't lost since 2012. You're now 15-1, and the majority of those fights have occurred in the UFC's deepest weight class. They say to him, what do you want? You get to choose. What are you picking? Are you picking a title shot? Are you picking the winner of Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier? Are you picking Conor McGregor? Are you picking someone like a Justin Gaethje just to stay active and get paid? Are you picking a rematch against Donald Cerrone?
I'm picking the title fight.
You are?
Absolutely, without question. It's not even close. I mean, the Conor fight would be a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. And I think that Tony wants to fight Conor for a multitude of reasons. One of them being that he feels like Conor broke a promise to him very early on when he was already at Paradigm. Conor came in, said, hey, I'm at 145. I'm not trying to come for your 155. We all know what happened there. Tony leaving Paradigm this last year. I think that's a personal fight, and I think that that's a fight that the UFC could sell. I think it's a fight that you and I would both be extremely interested in, right? But if it's up to Tony, if they tell him, hey, yeah, you've earned the right to call your shot here. It's all about the belt. It's still about the belt. It's not about fighting Conor McGregor. It is about holding that belt and being a champion. I mean, that's why people we get distracted by these other storylines because they're fun and Conor McGregor is such a big name. But at the end of the day, what is everybody going here for? It's for the belt. And Khabib Nurmagomedov is the undefeated champion, especially if he is the guy and he defeats Dustin Poirier. That fight has been put together so many times, fallen through so many times. That is the fight to determine. Again, of course, if Dustin Poirier loses and Khabib is still undefeated, that is the fight to determine the #1 lightweight in the world. That is what I would ask for if I was Tony Ferguson.
And so those two, Khabib and Dustin Poirier, are fighting on September 7th in Abu Dhabi. Most likely, the winner isn't returning until December, January at the earliest. That means he's not fighting. Tony isn't fighting for the rest of the year. You okay with that if you're Tony Ferguson?
I am, because why put anything on the risk at this point? You know, I mean, anything can happen. You can go into a fight with Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is a wild man. You can go in there and you can break your hand. You know, you can slip on a banana peel. Anything can happen in those fights. Tony Ferguson has gone above and beyond what it takes to earn a title shot. He deserves it. Why in the world would you put it at risk? I mean, the only reason to do it is that if it's not guaranteed. And you're sitting there thinking, am I going to wait? And then I'm not going to get what I'm waiting for. And that's a real possibility. But if the UFC is saying, you know, hey, Tony, you've done enough. We're going to do this right. And even though we could probably make more money with this Conor McGregor fight, we have to respect our rankings here to some degree. Yeah, if I'm Tony and I'm Tony's management team, I'm saying chill out, enjoy the summer, and then fight for the title at the end of the year.
Your heart does break a little bit for Donald Cerrone. Once again, so close to fighting for a belt, so close in a big fight, but unable to get over that hump. He ends up losing, and this is his first loss, of course, since becoming a father. We certainly know that he will be back, and wish him a speedy recovery. Now let's go to the main event, because I thought that was the second biggest story of the night. You can argue it was the biggest story of the night. Henry Cejudo defeating Marlon Moraes via TKO in the 3rd round. He is now the flyweight champion and the bantamweight champion, and he'll also say that he's a former Olympic champion, so he's now the Triple C. And what a performance this was out of Henry Cejudo. First of all, not looking very good in the 1st round, losing the 1st round, and then coming back in the 2nd and 3rd and looking as good as he did. And then you find out that he had a severely sprained ankle. This was the injury that we all were speculating about earlier in the week. He apparently injured his ankle as he was training in the hotel here in Chicago. The mats apparently weren't taped properly. He rolled his ankle. That's why he was wearing 2 ankle sleeves in this fight, and he's able to overcome all of that to win. Unbelievable performance. I continue to be blown away by this man.
Yeah, he's just a winner, you know, and at one point he was the youngest man to ever win, the youngest American to ever win an Olympic gold medal in wrestling. So this is nothing new for Henry Cejudo, but you can almost sense that he's willing these things to happen. I mean, I noticed some people kind of noticed that when he and Marlon stared down at the ceremonial weigh-ins, the odd way in which he was flexing his body, almost like, I saw some people say, you know, it was almost like a child would do it, you know, where his whole body was shaking. But I'm just picking up this intensity from Henry Cejudo that he is willing things to happen, and to the point of, you know, having a severe ankle injury, you're tearing a ligament there in the middle of fight week. I mean, the amount of mental strength it takes to get past that, then have the 1st round that he had, and turn around, and not only just turn around and win the fight, but he dominated Marlon Moraes from the point on in which he turned the tide. Henry Cejudo is, you know, I asked Dana White at the end of the night, you know, Henry was talking about how this fight, he was going to prove he's a #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. What do you think? You know, Khabib, Daniel Cormier, John Jones. I thought Dana White gave a good answer. He's like, he might be jumping his gun a little bit. You know, I still think he's behind John Jones. Khabib's undefeated, but he's certainly up there, and now he's in the conversation. He deserves 100%. To be in that conversation.
Absolutely. And so I asked you at the beginning of the night, if Cejudo wins, is it possible that he actually saves the flyweight division? And apparently Dana White said at the post-fight press conference that the flyweights are sticking around after all of this.
Isn't it amazing?
After getting rid of all, there's like literally 5 guys left in this division. I'm kidding. I think it's around 10 to 13.
Yeah.
They are actually sticking around. Did he do it? Did he really do it?
Yes.
He saved them. He actually saved them by winning at 135.
I got to say, man, I thought I was giving myself a lot of credit. I remember you and I, we did this podcast back in January, and you know, we were trying to call out, well, what was going to happen with the flyweight division, and I made it pretty clear that I thought it does not matter what happens. The flyweight division is not going to stick around. And I felt that way all up until about this week. And now all of a sudden, I think Henry Cejudo has won Dana over. I think he's done it, you know, not from the antics that he's doing. I think that that's sort of giving him a little bit of a bigger platform, obviously, and it keeps him a little bit relevant between fights. But I think he's doing it because of the fights, going out and knocking out TJ Dillashaw in the manner in which he did, having a performance like tonight. I think he has won over the boss in UFC President Dana White. And now the flyweights get to stick around. It is remarkable.
His next fight, do you think it's at 135 or 125?
I think it's a 135.
Yeah. Well, Aljamain Sterling had a big win tonight. Petr Yan had a big win. Dominic Cruz is on the comeback trail. There are a lot of options for Henry Cejudo. One last thing before I let you go. I have to ask you about Valentina Shevchenko. Phenomenal knockout, a scary knockout, devastating knockout against Jessica Ai. That head kick, and it was, like I said, scary to watch Ai not get up for quite some time. She was on the mat. Thankfully, she seems to be okay. She got up. She was able to walk out of the cage. You look at that flyweight division. You look at the rest of the 125-pounders in the female weight class. Do you see anyone that could challenge Valentina right now?
I see a lot of weeks like this.
Yeah.
I see a lot of fight weeks where Valentina's almost not getting a whole lot of attention because it's just a foregone conclusion that she is going to smash her opponent. And how difficult is that, man, to go into a fight week where every expectation is you're going to win the fight, and to somehow still exceed expectations, to drop Jessica Ai in the way in which she did, to create that type of highlight. I mean, she could have won in a billion different ways, and we probably wouldn't have been impressed, but she finds the one way to go out and still impress us against an opponent that she's just better than. And I think that's going to be the case for her a lot of her upcoming fights. I asked her that. I think she's aware of it as well. And she wants to just stay active. I think it's kind of like the John Jones situation. We're like, hey, I'm going to be favored. I'm going to probably beat a lot of these women. Let's line them up and let's do this quickly. I'm ready. I'm coming out of these fights healthy. Let's do the next one in a few months.
Some big performances tonight. Caitlin Chukagian defeated Joanne Calderwood in a big fight. Eddie Wineland, Chicago's own, with a big win as well. And how about Calvin Kattar and Alexa Grasso? Aljamain Sterling, as I mentioned. Tatiana Suarez remains undefeated. Some nice performances here in Chicago.
Absolutely.
Bogoy, Ivanov. In the end, though, everyone leaves buzzing over what Henry Cejudo did. He is now the double champ, flyweight, bantamweight, triple champ. He would say if he was standing up here again. Olympic champion as well. Valentina Shevchenko retains her title. And, of course, the other big one, Tony Ferguson defeating Donald Cerrone. And now we will see what happens to him next. All right, we are done from here in Chicago. They are closing things down behind us. We got to go. They're wrapping us up. No more time. We're done. Thanks for watching our coverage all week long from here in the Windy City. For Brett, for our entire crew here in Chicago, again, thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week. We appreciate your support.